right now, as you watch this, somewhere in a narrow stretch of water, barely 21 miles wide at its tightest point, a supertanker the length of 4 football fields is gliding silently through the dark. It's carrying enough crude oil to power a small country for days. And it's not alone. Every single day, roughly 20% of the world's entire oil supply passes through this one choke point. Shut it down, and the global economy doesn't just slow, it convulses. This is the Strait of Hormuz. And if you think it only matters to oil traders and military strategists, you haven't heard its full story. Because this 250-kilometer-long channel between the Persian Gulf and the Arabian Sea has been the most contested and most strategically vital waterway on Earth. Not just today, but for literally 5,000 years. 7 civilizations have fought for control of these waters. And the drama playing out today? It's just the latest chapter in one of history's longest-running power struggles. Let's go back to the beginning. The Elamites and early Sumerians, 3000 to 1000 BCE. 5,000 years ago, the world's first urban civilizations were blooming in Mesopotamia, modern-day Iraq. The Sumerians built cities like Ur and Uruk. They invented writing, they built ziggurats, and they were obsessed with trade. Cuneiform tablets, the world's oldest written records, mention a mysterious land called Dilmun, which we now associate with modern Bahrain. They describe trade with Magan, likely modern Oman, and Meluha, the Indus Valley civilization, in modern Pakistan and India. And where did all that trade flow? Through the strait. Archaeologists have found copper from Oman, carnelian beads from India, and lapis lazuli from Afghanistan, all in Sumerian grave sites dating back to 2500 BCE. While the Sumerians are remembered in every history textbook, their eastern neighbors, the Elamites, are the forgotten architects of the strait's early history. The Elamite civilization flourished in what is now southwestern Iran, centered on the great city of Susa. They spoke a language isolate, unrelated to Semitic or Indo-European tongues, and they worshipped a pantheon of gods led by the great mother goddess Pinikir. But their true genius was geographical. The Elamites sat squarely on the eastern shore of the Persian Gulf, with their ports at Lian, near modern Bushehr, and further south along the Makran coast. While the Sumerians had to ask permission to pass through the strait, the Elamites owned the doorstep. The Elamites were the first civilization to systematically tax maritime trade. They did not build a massive navy in the early period. That would come later. But they established fortified way stations along the Iranian coast, where Sumerian, Magan, and Meluhan ships were forced to dock, pay tribute, and resupply. The Sumerians, however, were not content to let the Elamites act as eternal gatekeepers. Around 2334 BCE, the Semitic warlord Sargon of Akkad launched the world's first true imperial conquest. He conquered Sumer, marched to the Mediterranean, and then turned east, toward the Gulf. Sargon understood the strait's value. He launched a naval expedition from Agade, sailing down the Gulf, through the strait, directly to the copper mines of Oman. Sargon's fleet was a flotilla of troop transports carrying Akkadian soldiers to subdue the Magan chiefs and extract direct tribute. The Elamites were sidelined. It was a preview of every great power that would later try to force the passage. Sargon's success was short-lived. His empire collapsed after his death, and the strait reverted to Elamite and Magan control. But the lesson was written in clay. Whoever holds the strait holds the world's throat. The Achaemenid Persian Empire. In 550 BCE, a man named Cyrus the Great united the Persian tribes and launched one of the most explosive imperial expansions in human history. Within a generation, the Achaemenid Persian Empire stretched from the Aegean Sea to the borders of India, the largest empire the world had ever seen. The Persians were the first civilization to truly systematize control of the Strait of Hormuz. They built a naval infrastructure, established trade regulations, and used the waterway as a commercial lifeline connecting their vast empire's eastern and western halves. Persian administrators levied taxes on goods flowing through. Merchants from India, Arabia, and the Mediterranean all converged here. When Alexander the Great destroyed the Achaemenid Empire in 330 BCE, burning Persepolis, killing Darius III, one of his first priorities was to secure the Persian Gulf. He personally planned a great naval expedition around the Arabian Peninsula. He died before he could execute it. But the fact that he was planning it tells you everything about how critical this waterway already was. The Parthians and Sassanids. For nearly a century, the Strait of Hormuz became a chaotic backwater. But in 247 BCE, the Parthians, nomads from the steppes, swept into Iran and resurrected the Persian imperial tradition. They rebuilt the Gulf ports, re-established customs houses, and patrolled the Narrows. Greek, Indian, and Arab merchants all paid tribute to the Parthian crown, but the Parthians were never fully secure. In 224 CE, the Persian nobleman Ardashir I overthrew them and founded the Sassanid Empire, a superpower that would rule Iran for over 4 centuries. The Sassanids had a problem. Their great rival was the Byzantine Empire to the west, which grew rich off the Silk Road. The Sassanids tried to cut off those routes, but Byzantine merchants simply went around them, by sea, through the Strait of Hormuz. The strait became the fulcrum of a Cold War between two superpowers. The Sassanids weaponized it. They transformed the Iranian coastline into a maritime machine, dredging canals, building lighthouses, and creating the most commercially active waterway in the medieval world. Every ship that passed through the Narrows paid tribute to the King of Kings. But beneath the surface, a new force stirred. The Sassanids had employed Arab skippers and warriors, but they never fully trusted them. In the 630s CE, after devastating wars with Byzantium had drained their treasury, the Arabs united under Islam and struck. In 636 CE, they shattered the Sassanid army. Arab naval forces, crewed by Persian sailors, sailed down the Gulf and captured the ports. The Sassanid Empire collapsed in 651 CE. The Arab Islamic Caliphates, 632 to 1258 CE. The rise of Islam was one of the most transformative events in world history, and it completely reshaped the Strait of Hormuz. Within 20 years of the Prophet Muhammad's death, Arab Muslim armies had conquered the Sassanid Empire entirely. The Persian Gulf, once a Sassanid lake, became an Islamic highway. Under the Umayyad and later Abbasid caliphates, Gulf trade exploded. Arab merchants sailing in dhows, elegant, lateen-rigged sailing vessels, perfectly suited to the Indian Ocean's seasonal monsoon winds, became the undisputed masters of the sea lanes from East Africa to China. Marco Polo visited Hormuz in the late 13th century and described it as a place where merchants came from India, Persia, Arabia, and East Africa, dealing in spices, precious stones, silks, and ivory. The famous traveler Ibn Battuta visited in the 14th century and was equally impressed. But prosperity attracts predators. The Portuguese Empire, 1507 to 1622. In 1498, Vasco da Gama rounded the Cape of Good Hope and reached India. It was one of the most consequential voyages in human history, and it put the Portuguese on a collision course with Hormuz. The Portuguese had a grand strategy: control every major choke point in the Indian Ocean, and you control global trade. They called it the Estado de India, the State of India. And Hormuz sat right at the top of their target list. In 1507, a Portuguese fleet under Afonso de Albuquerque appeared before the city of Hormuz. Portuguese cannons tore apart Arab and Persian ships. The ruler of Hormuz was forced to submit and pay tribute. In 1515, Albuquerque returned with overwhelming force. He captured the island and built a massive fortress, the Forte Nossa Senhora da Conceição, whose ruins you can still visit today on Hormuz Island in Iran. For the next century, the Portuguese controlled the strait with an iron fist. Every ship passing through paid customs to the Portuguese crown. No exceptions. In 1622, a combined English-Persian force, the English East India Company, allied with Shah Abbas I of the Safavid Empire, attacked and expelled the Portuguese. Shah Abbas moved the main port to the mainland, founding Bandar Abbas, which remains the most important port city on the Iranian side of the strait to this day. The British Empire, 1763 to 1971. The British didn't just replace the Portuguese, they built something far more systematic, a protectorate system that would define the Gulf for 2 centuries. Through a series of treaties signed with Arab sheikdoms, Britain gradually assumed control over the external affairs of what are now the UAE, Bahrain, Qatar, Kuwait, and Oman. These became known as the Trucial States, so named because of the truces the British imposed to suppress piracy. That calculation changed dramatically in 1908 when oil was discovered in Persia, and in the 1930s when massive reserves were found across the Arabian Peninsula. Suddenly, the Strait of Hormuz wasn't just a route to India, it was the tap on the world's most valuable resource. Britain's Gulf presence deepened. The Royal Navy patrolled the strait. British oil companies, primarily the Anglo-Persian Oil Company, which became BP, extracted and sold the Gulf's petroleum wealth. In 1971, Britain announced its withdrawal from east of Suez. The Gulf protectorates became independent nations. The UAE, Bahrain, Qatar. Britain left a power vacuum. Into that vacuum stepped 2 competing powers, Iran and Saudi Arabia. And lurking behind both of them, the United States. The modern Great Game. The modern history of the Strait of Hormuz reads like a thriller novel, except it's real, and the stakes are almost incomprehensibly high. After Britain left, in 1971, the Nixon administration adopted the Twin Pillars policy, relying on Iran under the Shah and Saudi Arabia to maintain stability in the Gulf. That policy collapsed in 1979 with the Iranian Revolution. The Iran-Iraq War brought the strait to the world's attention in a new and terrifying way. Both sides attacked oil tankers in what became known as the Tanker War. In 1988, the USS Vincennes shot down Iran Air Flight 655, killing all 290 civilians on board. One of the darkest chapters in American naval history. After the Cold War, the U.S. settled into a permanent military presence in the Gulf. The Fifth Fleet is headquartered in Bahrain. A U.S. carrier strike group patrols the Gulf at almost all times. And Iran? Iran has developed an asymmetric strategy specifically designed to threaten the strait. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy operates swarms of small, fast boats armed with missiles and torpedoes. The IRGC has repeatedly threatened to close the strait entirely. The 2019 tanker incidents brought mysterious explosions and attacks on oil tankers in the Gulf of Oman near the strait's entrance. As recently as 2023 and 2024, Iranian forces seized commercial vessels near the strait, sending unmistakable geopolitical signals. Then came early 2026. Israel and the U.S. attacked Iran's nuclear facilities, triggering a shooting war in the Persian Gulf. Within a week, Iran closed the Strait of Hormuz. Oil prices surged past $100 a barrel. LNG shipments from Qatar stopped flowing to Europe. Global supply chains, already fragile, shattered. The world was suddenly, brutally reminded that a 30-mile gap in the rocks could bring the global economy to its knees. Iran, like the Sassanids before them, understood that the strait was not just a defensive choke point, it was an offensive weapon. Closing it would strangle their own oil-dependent economy too. But in 2026, they did it anyway. The Sassanids fell to the Arabs in the 7th century, but their maritime doctrine, their understanding of the strait's power, has outlived their empire. And in the waters of 2026, as missiles fly and tankers burn, that ancient Persian ghost is still pulling the strings. If you made it this far, drop a comment below with the name of whichever civilization surprised you most. And if you want more deep dives into the geography that shapes geopolitics, subscribe. We've got a lot more waterways to explore.